The plant that kept your great-grandmother alive through hard winters, through sickness, through years when a doctor was 3 days away by wagon, is probably rotting in your yard right now. And you have been pulling it up by the roots every single spring. Somewhere between the rise of the pharmacy and the invention of the grocery store, we stopped knowing our yards. We stopped seeing food. We stopped seeing medicine. We started seeing weeds. What got lost in that shift wasn't just knowledge. It was freedom. The kind of quiet, unpatentable freedom that comes from knowing your land can take care of you. This video gives that back. 20 plants. Growing right now across every state, every climate zone, every ordinary yard in this country. Before we begin, number 17 on this list is actively studied by researchers investigating antiviral treatments. It grows in nearly every American lawn, and almost nobody knows its name. And number 20, this one sat in the official United States Pharmacopoeia for over 100 years. Modern immunology labs still study it. Your grandparents knew it by sight. Almost no one living today does. If this is the kind of knowledge you want to keep, hit subscribe. Not because it's a button, because you're choosing to be the kind of person who remembers what the world forgot. Here are 20 medicinal weeds growing in your yard right now, ranked from remarkable to absolutely unforgettable. Number 1, dandelion, Taraxacum officinale. Arab physicians were writing about this plant as a liver and kidney remedy by the 10th century. Persian doctors called it tarashak. By the 13th century, it had moved through trade routes into every European herbal tradition. It was not a weed. It was a staple. Then synthetic diuretics hit the market in the mid-20th century. Dandelion was quietly retired from medical conversation, not disproven, just reclassified. Lawn care companies made billions reinforcing the idea that it was a nuisance. Studies showed dandelion root contains compounds that support liver function and bile production. Research confirms its leaves act as a natural diuretic with one critical advantage over pharmaceutical versions. Dandelion replenishes the potassium that synthetic diuretics strip out. Dry the roots, chop them coarsely, simmer in water for 20 minutes, and strain. 1 cup of dandelion root tea daily was used for generations to support digestion and reduce water retention. Dandelion can interact with blood-thinning medications and prescribed diuretics. Check with a healthcare provider before regular use. We spent decades engineering herbicides specifically designed to kill this plant. It was free. It was effective. It was growing outside our door the entire time. Number 2, broadleaf plantain, Platago major. Native Americans called it white man's footprint because it appeared wherever European settlers walked. But indigenous peoples across North America adopted it almost immediately, recognizing in a single generation what their healers understood at a glance. Plantain appeared in virtually every American home remedy book through the 1800s. The moment commercial antibiotic ointments became available, the tube replaced the leaf. Nobody announced a replacement. The knowledge just quietly left the house. Research confirms plantain contains aucubin and allantoin compounds documented to promote cell regeneration and reduce inflammation. Studies show antimicrobial properties that help prevent infection in minor wounds and insect stings. Crush a fresh plantain leaf or chew it slightly, then press it firmly onto a bee sting, splinter puncture, or shallow cut. Hold for 10 to 15 minutes. People used to do this automatically, without thinking. This plant grows in almost every American yard right now. Most people step over it without a second thought. That is one of the quieter losses of modern life. Number 3, chickweed, Stellaria media. Traditional Chinese medicine documented this plant over 2,000 years ago. The European herbalist John Gerard recorded it in the 16th century as a treatment for skin irritation and lung complaints. 2 separate traditions. Same plant, same conclusion. Chickweed was recommended by early American physicians for chest conditions. As cortisone creams and pharmaceutical cough suppressants became widely available in the 1950s, this plant was reclassified as a garden pest quietly, without comparison, without debate. Studies show chickweed contains saponins and flavonoids with documented anti-inflammatory effects on skin. Research confirms cooling, soothing properties that reduce itching and irritation from eczema and psoriasis-type conditions. Pack fresh chickweed leaves into a clean cloth, tie it off, and apply to inflamed or itchy skin. Leave for 30 minutes. People used it the same way we now reach for a cortisone tube. Your grandmother may have called this starweed. She kept it fresh in a damp cloth in the kitchen drawer. We forgot to ask her what it was for. Number 4, red clover, Trifolium pratense. Traditional herbalists across Central Asia used red clover for chest complaints for centuries before European contact. The Cherokee used it for respiratory conditions, documented independently from European traditions. When two separate civilizations land on the same plant for the same use, that is not coincidence. Red clover's disappearance from common use aligns almost exactly with the introduction of synthetic hormone therapy in the 1960s. The plant contains isoflavones, compounds that function like mild estrogen. When patentable synthetic versions arrived, the clover stayed in the field. Research confirms red clover isoflavones help reduce menopausal symptoms, including hot flashes. Studies show potential cardiovascular benefit through improved arterial flexibility. Documented evidence indicates anti-inflammatory effects on respiratory tissue. Dry the flower heads fully. Steep 1 tablespoon in boiling water for 10 minutes, strain, and drink as a tea. Traditionally used for coughs, bronchitis, and hormonal transitions in women. Red clover can thin the blood and carries mild estrogenic activity. Avoid if you have a history of hormone-sensitive conditions. Do not combine with blood thinners without guidance. This plant was a cornerstone of women's health across multiple continents for 1,000 years. The clover is still out there, in fields, growing season after season, waiting for someone to remember. Number 5. Purslane, Portulaca oleracea. One of the oldest cultivated plants on Earth. Documented in ancient Egyptian medicine. Referenced in Persian texts from 900 AD. Mahatma Gandhi reportedly named it among his favorite foods. Ancient Greek, Indian, and Arab medical traditions all recorded it independently, simultaneously. Purslane was a common American table green through the 1800s. Cookbooks listed it alongside spinach. As industrialized agriculture standardized what vegetables looked like, purslane was reclassified as invasive and quietly vanished from produce sections. Studies show purslane contains more omega-3 fatty acids than any other plant yet analyzed. Research confirms significant antioxidant activity, documented melatonin content, and blood sugar regulation effects consistent with traditional use. Eat it raw in salads. The leaves are faintly sour and satisfying. Or sauté with garlic and olive oil. The entire plant above ground is edible. It grows back after cutting. If you have purslane in your garden right now, you have a plant that sells for $50 a pound in specialty health stores, and most people are pulling it up and throwing it in the trash. Number 6. Lamb's quarters, Chenopodium album. Archaeological evidence shows lamb's quarters seeds in prehistoric European settlements dating back 5,000 years. Native American tribes ground the seeds into flour. In India, it is still cultivated as a green vegetable called bathua. This plant fed entire civilizations while staying invisible to the ones that followed. European colonization and later industrial food systems replaced traditional wild greens with domesticated, standardized crops. Lamb's quarters did not make the cut. It was left in the field with a weed label and the knowledge of what was left with it. Research confirms lamb's quarters is exceptionally high in vitamins A, C, and K. Studies show calcium content that rivals dairy sources gram for gram. Documented antioxidant compounds protect cellular tissue from oxidative damage. Young leaves cook exactly like spinach. Steam lightly, add salt, eat as a side. The dried seeds can be ground into flour and added to bread or porridge, exactly as they were 5,000 years ago. Contains oxalates. People prone to kidney stones should eat in variety rather than as a daily staple. Nutritionists travel the world searching for ancient superfoods. This one is growing through the crack in your driveway. It has been the entire time. Number 7. Goldenrod, Solidago canadensis. The Ojibwe, the Iroquois, and the Potawatomi each documented goldenrod uses independently wound treatment, kidney support, fever reduction. It was a first aid kit that bloomed every August across the eastern continent. Then goldenrod was blamed incorrectly for causing hay fever throughout most of the 20th century. It blooms at the same time as ragweed, which is the actual culprit. That misidentification was never fully corrected in public health messaging. The plant got the blame. The reputation never recovered. Studies show goldenrod has significant anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. Research confirms documented diuretic effects that support kidney and urinary tract function. European countries currently use standardized goldenrod preparations as approved herbal medicine for urinary infections. Dry the flower clusters and steep in boiling water for 15 minutes. Drink as a tea for urinary tract support. Many herbalists use it in combination protocols for kidney cleansing. Almost every American recognizes goldenrod. Almost none of them know what it actually does, or that Europe has been using it clinically for decades while we were blaming it for our sneezing. Number 8. Mullein, Verbascum thapsus. The Greek physician Dioscorides recommended mullein for lung conditions in 65 AD, and his work influenced Western medicine for 1,500 years. Native Americans smoked dried mullein leaves for respiratory relief. European colonists deliberately packed mullein seeds when they crossed the Atlantic. They considered it essential. Mullein teas and tinctures appeared regularly in American medical references through the early 1900s. When pharmaceutical bronchodilators and cough syrups arrived after World War II, mullein exited mainstream awareness, not banned, not disproven, just quietly set aside. Research confirms mullein contains saponins and mucilage that coat and soothe inflamed mucous membranes. Studies show antimicrobial activity against several respiratory pathogens. Documented evidence indicates expectorant properties that help clear congestion from the airway. Dry the large velvety leaves. Steep 2 to 3 in boiling water for 10 minutes, then strain carefully through a cloth. The small leaf hairs must be removed before drinking. Always strain mullein tea through a fine cloth. The tiny hairs can irritate your throat and lungs if consumed. This step is not optional. This plant kept soldiers breathing through the Civil War. It kept miners alive in coal country. Is still growing along roadsides right now, tall, silver green, and entirely ignored. Number 9. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium. The plant's scientific name comes directly from Achilles. Greek legend held that he staunched the bleeding of his soldiers' wounds at Troy with this plant. More remarkably, pollen found in Neanderthal burial sites includes yarrow. The use of this plant predates written history by tens of thousands of years. Yarrow appeared in the official United States Pharmacopoeia from 1863 through 1882. It was accepted medical practice. When synthetic wound management research took over in the early 20th century, yarrow was quietly dropped from the texts. Never discredited. Never replaced with something demonstrably better. Just removed. Research confirms yarrow contains achiltin, a compound documented to shorten clotting time in wounds. Studies show anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial activity. Documented fever-reducing use spans European, Native American, and Asian medical traditions simultaneously. Press a handful of fresh crushed yarrow leaves firmly onto a bleeding wound and hold for 5 to 10 minutes. This was battlefield medicine. It was kitchen medicine. Studies confirm it works now. Can cause allergic reactions in people sensitive to the daisy family. Increases photosensitivity. Some populations should avoid it during pregnancy. Before gauze. Before antiseptic spray. Before the first aid kit. There was yarrow, and it grew at the edge of every field. Every soldier knew its shape. Number 10. Wood sorrel, Oxalis stricta. The Iroquois used wood sorrel to treat fevers and mouth sores. West African herbalists used related species in wound preparations. In medieval Europe, it was listed under the name Alleluia because it bloomed around Easter, considered a gift precisely when winter illness peaked. Wood sorrel was a common kitchen herb and tea plant through the 18th century in America. As the focus narrowed to commercially packaged herbs, this plant lost its identity entirely. Today, most Americans see its tiny yellow flowers and assume dandelion. Studies show wood sorrel is high in vitamin C, historically used to prevent scurvy in populations with no other access. Research confirms its oxalic acid compounds carry documented antimicrobial properties. Observed diaphoretic effects support traditional use for reducing mild fevers. The leaves and flowers are edible raw. They taste exactly like lemon. A simple tea from steeped fresh leaves was traditionally used to bring down mild fevers and soothe sore throats. Contains oxalic acid. People with kidney stones, gout, or rheumatic conditions should consume only small amounts. The next time you see tiny heart-shaped leaves and yellow flowers in your lawn, stop. That is not a weed. That is an emergency vitamin C source growing itself. For free. Number 11. Ground ivy, Glaucoma heteracea. Anglo-Saxon healers used ground ivy as a primary remedy for centuries before the Norman conquest of England. They called it alehof. It was used to clarify and preserve ale before hops became standard. It moved to every English colony in the world, including America, deliberately. Ground ivy was used in American folk medicine through the 1800s for sinus complaints, tinnitus, and ear infections. When pharmaceutical decongestants arrived mid-century, this plant was classified as an invasive lawn weed. No documented comparison. No clinical decision. Just gone. Research confirms ground ivy contains rosmarinic acid, a compound with documented anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. Studies show antimicrobial activity against several common respiratory bacteria. Observed expectorant effects support traditional use for chronic sinus congestion. Steep a tablespoon of fresh or dried ground ivy leaves in hot water for 10 minutes. Strain and drink for sinus pressure or chronic congestion. Herbalists used it specifically for what they called catarrh, the thick, stuck mucus of cold season. Avoid large quantities. Compounds in ground ivy are toxic to grazing animals in excess. In reasonable amounts for humans, documented toxicity is not established, but moderation applies. We built antihistamine empires worth billions of dollars to treat the same sinus problems this plant was already handling, growing for free in every yard in the country. Number 12. St. John's wort, Hypericum perforatum. Ancient Greek physicians Galen and Dioscorides documented St. John's wort for nervous disorders and wound healing. European monasteries cultivated it as essential medicine for centuries. It was considered so important it was hung in doorways as a protective plant during midsummer. When clinical studies in the 1990s showed St. John's wort was comparably effective to antidepressants for mild to moderate depression, the pharmaceutical response was significant. In the United States, it cannot legally be marketed as a treatment for depression. In Germany, it is a licensed, prescribed medication. The science is the same. The regulatory decision is not. Research confirms hypericin and hyperforeign active compounds in this plant influence serotonin reuptake in documented clinical trials. European studies show effectiveness comparable to low-dose SSRIs for mild to moderate depression. The evidence is not fringe. It is peer-reviewed. Dry the yellow flower heads. Steep in oil for 4 to 6 weeks to create a topical preparation for nerve pain and bruising. For internal use, 300 milligrams of standardized extract 3 times daily is the European clinical protocol. Serious drug interactions exist. St. John's wort accelerates liver enzyme activity and can reduce effectiveness of birth control, antivirals, blood thinners, and certain cancer medications. Do not combine with prescription antidepressants. A licensed pharmaceutical treatment in one country, a weed in another. The only difference is the patent. The plant does not care about the patent. Number 13. Burdock, Archeum lapa. Traditional Chinese medicine documented burdock root called nupangzi as a blood purifier and lymphatic support for over 2,000 years. Japanese culture cultivated it as a food crop called gobo. Medieval European herbalists used it under the name bardane for skin conditions and joint disease. 3 continents. Same root. Same conclusions. Burdock was listed in official American medical references into the early 1900s. The development of corticosteroids in the 1950s displaced most traditional anti-inflammatory plants from Western clinical practice, burdock among them. It fell out of awareness within a single generation. Studies show burdock contains inulin, mucilage, and polyacetylenes with documented anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial effects. Research confirms prebiotic properties that actively support gut microbiome diversity. Documented evidence indicates mild blood sugar regulation consistent with traditional use. Scrub and slice the root like a carrot. Sauté in oil with soy sauce and sesame oil. This is the traditional Japanese Kinpira gobo preparation. Eaten regularly, it was considered a kidney and lymph tonic across multiple cultures simultaneously. Can cause reactions in people sensitive to the daisy family. May amplify blood sugar reduction. Use carefully with diabetes medications. The sticky burrs catching on your socks every fall. That is the same root eaten as medicine and food in Asia for 2,000 years. It has been trying to get your attention. Number 14. Stinging nettle, Urtica dioica. Roman soldiers rubbed stinging nettle on their legs during the British campaign to warm themselves in the northern cold, a practice called urtication. Germanic tribes used nettle fiber for clothing and the leaf for medicine at the same time. It appears in Norse, Greek, Arab, and Native American healing traditions, independently on different continents. Nettle preparations were standard in rural American medicine through the 1800s. Then industrial agriculture labeled it an invasive pest, and pharmaceutical allergy medications made herbal antihistamines seem unnecessary. Nettle lost its medicinal identity within 50 years. That is how fast knowledge disappears when nobody writes it down. Research confirms stinging nettle has documented anti-inflammatory effects that rival some pharmaceutical NSAIDs in small clinical studies. Studies show meaningful reduction in hay fever symptoms. Documented evidence indicates nettle root affects prostate tissue. European clinical practice uses it for benign prostatic hyperplasia. Blanch fresh nettle leaves in boiling water for 3 minutes. This neutralizes the sting completely. Drain and eat like cooked spinach. Or steep dried leaves for 15 minutes as a daily anti-inflammatory tea. Roman soldiers, Viking healers, Cherokee medicine women, your great-grandmother, they all knew this plant. We let the knowledge die within a single generation. You're probably starting to notice a pattern here. These plants were not lost because they stopped working. They were replaced by things that could be patented, bottled, and sold. The knowledge your grandparents carried for free became a product. And for that product to succeed, the old knowledge had to disappear first. Tell me in the comments which weeds on this list shock you the most, and why. I read every single one. Your comment might be the reason someone else watches this video and finally recognizes what is growing in their yard. That is how knowledge survives now. Back to the list, we are just reaching the most powerful plants on this entire countdown. Number 15, Motherwort, Leonuris cardiaca. The scientific name says everything. Cardiaca. European physicians were using motherwort for heart palpitations and anxiety by at least the 13th century. Chinese medicine uses a closely related species called mu chow, literally beneficial mother herb, for cardiovascular and menstrual support across 2,000 years of documented use. Motherwort appeared regularly in American domestic medical guides through the 1800s. Herbalist manuals recommended it for what they called nervous heart complaints, anxiety-related palpitations. When benzodiazepines arrived in the 1960s, everything labeled nervous became pharmaceutical territory. Motherwort left with everything else. Research confirms motherwort contains leonurin, a compound with documented mild sedative and cardiovascular effects. Studies show it slows elevated heart rate and reduces palpitation frequency in clinical observations. Documented uterine activity is consistent with traditional menstrual use. Steep 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried motherwort in hot water for 10 minutes. Drink 1 cup for anxiety-related heart racing. It does not sedate, it steadies. Motherwort stimulates uterine contractions. Do not use during pregnancy. Documented interactions exist with cardiac glycosides and sedative medications. We have an entire pharmaceutical category for anxiety-related heart symptoms with dependency risk and withdrawal protocols attached. This plant does something similar. It costs nothing. It grows itself. Number 16, Feverfew, Tanacetum parthenium. Dioscorides described feverfew for headache and menstrual regulation in the 1st century. The 17th century English herbalist Nicholas Culpeper listed it as essential for headache relief. Colonists brought it deliberately to the Americas. It naturalized across the continent and was standard in domestic medicine through the early 1900s. Feverfew disappeared from common awareness within a generation of aspirin's commercial availability. What makes this story different from others on this list? Feverfew was actually studied afterward. Multiple clinical trials. The results were inconvenient. The coverage was limited. Research confirms feverfew contains parthenolide, a compound that inhibits platelet aggregation and prostaglandin synthesis, mechanisms directly linked to migraine onset. Multiple clinical trials show significant reduction in migraine frequency and severity with consistent use. Eat 2 to 3 fresh feverfew leaves daily in a sandwich or with food, the traditional European preventive method. For migraine prevention, consistent daily use over weeks is documented as more effective than single doses at onset. Stopping feverfew abruptly can cause rebound headaches and joint pain. Taper slowly. It also increases bleeding risk and should not be taken before surgery or combined with blood thinners. A plant confirmed in multiple clinical trials to reduce migraine frequency is growing wild across most of the continental United States right now. The question is why it never comes up in that conversation. Number 17, Self-Heal/Heal-All, Prunella vulgaris. Medieval European monks called it self-heal because they believed the flower's shape resembling the throat and tonsils marked it by divine intention as a healing plant. Traditional Chinese medicine documented it as Xia Ku Chao for over 1,000 years. Native American healers across North America used it independently. 3 traditions, 1 plant, no contact between them. Self-heal was not suppressed. It was not replaced with controversy. It was buried under a quieter assumption that something so common, growing in every lawn, could not possibly carry real weight. That is a different kind of loss. Not dramatic, just slow. Here is what makes this one remarkable. Prenelin, a compound isolated from self-heal, has demonstrated antiviral activity in laboratory studies, including documented inhibition of HIV replication and herpes simplex virus. Studies show anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. Documented evidence indicates immune-modulating effects that are actively being studied in current research. Steep fresh or dried self-heal flowers and leaves in boiling water for 10 to 15 minutes. Drink the tea for sore throats, or apply the cooled liquid as a topical wash on wounds and minor skin infections. Researchers studying antiviral compounds found activity in a plant that has been growing in your lawn since you moved into your house. It did not wait for the laboratory to validate. Number 18. Sheep sorrel, Rumex acidocella. Sheep sorrel appears in medieval European herbalism for fevers and digestive complaints. It is one of 4 plants in the traditional Ojibwe formula later documented by Canadian nurse Renee Kess in the early 20th century, a preparation she called Essiac. That formula became one of the most studied and most contested herbal cancer support preparations in North American history. Clinical investigation into Essiac was blocked, delayed, and defunded through the 1930s into the 1980s in both Canada and the United States. Whether this was about safety, economics, or institutional resistance to non-patentable medicine remains a documented, unresolved debate. The plant itself never changed. It kept growing in fields. Indifferent to the argument above it, research confirms sheep sorrel is high in antioxidant flavonoids and vitamin C. Studies show anti-inflammatory activity. Documented antimicrobial properties are supported by oxalic acid and tannin compound analysis. Research into the Essiac formula continues in university settings today. Young spring leaves of sheep sorrel are edible raw, sharp, sour, traditionally eaten as a cleansing spring green after winter. A tea from dried leaves was used for fever reduction and urinary support. Contains significant oxalic acid. Do not consume in large quantities. Avoid concentrated preparations during pregnancy. The story of sheep sorrel is not only about a plant. It is about what happens when a free plant suggests it might matter in serious illness. That is when things get complicated very fast. Number 19. Wild violet, Viola sororia. Hippocrates referenced violets in his medical texts. European folk medicine used them as a gentle remedy specifically for children for coughs, sore throats, and respiratory complaints. The Cherokee, the Iroquois, and the Choctaw each documented independent uses across the eastern United States. This plant has been recognized as medicinal by virtually every culture it has ever touched. Wild violet grew in every American household garden through the Victorian era, kept deliberately, not pulled. The shift from kitchen gardens to ornamental landscaping, and later to grass-only lawns, displaced it entirely. No one suppressed wild violet. They just replaced the knowledge that made people want to keep it. Research confirms wild violets are extraordinarily high in vitamins A and C gram for gram, higher than most domesticated greens. Studies show rutin, a flavonoid in violet leaves, has documented effects on blood vessel integrity and blood pressure regulation. Antimicrobial properties support traditional respiratory use. Add the leaves and flowers raw to spring salads. Or steep the flowers in honey for 2 to 3 weeks to create violet honey used traditionally as a gentle cough preparation for children. The flavor is delicate. The nutrition is serious. Your grandmother may have kept wild violets at the doorstep and called them decoration. She may have added the flowers to spring salads without explaining why. She was continuing something that went back to Hippocrates, and she may not have known it either. Number 20. Pokeweed, Phytolacca americana. This plant belongs to no timid tradition. The Cherokee, the Iroquois, and the Catawba use pokeweed root in carefully dosed, precisely controlled preparations for rheumatic disease and lymphatic swelling. Early American physicians included it in the official United States Pharmacopoeia from 1820 through 1947. 127 years in the official record. Then gone. Its removal was not purely a safety decision. It was also about the impossibility of fitting a wild, variable plant into a pharmaceutical system that required predictable, standardized, patentable doses. The knowledge of how to use it safely passed directly from healer to healer had no place in a system that required a prescription pad. That knowledge left with the last generation that carried it. This is the one that changes how you see all the others. Pokeweed mitogen, a compound extracted from pokeweed root, is one of the most potent immune system activators ever studied. Research confirms it is used in laboratory immunology as a standard research tool. Studies show antiviral activity against several viruses. Documented evidence indicates compounds in pokeweed have been investigated in cancer research for decades, not fringe interest, but peer-reviewed, funded academic science. Historically, the young spring shoots were boiled in multiple changes of water, the first water always discarded and eaten like asparagus. This preparation method was not casual. It was precise. People who knew it exactly. This warning is serious. Pokeweed root in large amounts is toxic, potentially fatally so. Every part of the mature plant carries increasing concentrations of phytolactotoxin. The berries are especially dangerous for children. Traditional safe uses required specific inherited knowledge and careful preparation. Do not experiment without deep prior study. It sat in the United States Pharmacopoeia for 127 years. Is actively studied in cancer immunology laboratories right now. Is growing at the edge of your yard, tall, dark-stemmed, heavy with purple berries. And almost no one living today knows what the last generation knew about it. Every plant in this video grew without your help, without a prescription, and without a price tag. They have been growing for thousands of years, feeding people, healing people, carrying knowledge across generations that had no other way to preserve it. What happened to this knowledge was not the natural result of progress. It was a slow, quiet replacement, not with something proven better, but with something that could be owned. And the gap left behind is exactly the shape of everything you just watched. Here is your challenge. Go outside today. Look at your yard. Pick one plant from this video, just one, and learn to identify it. Not to use it immediately, just to see it, to recognize it. That is how this starts. Recognition comes first. Everything else follows. If this video changed the way you see your yard, give it a like. It tells us this work matters. Now tell me in the comments, which plant surprised you most? Was it the one actively studied in antiviral research, or the one that sat in the official US Pharmacopoeia for over a century? I want to read your answer. And if you want to keep going deeper into the knowledge that almost disappeared, subscribe to Cropbound. Not because it's a button, because you're choosing to be the kind of person who remembers. The weeds were never the problem. We just forgot how to read them.